Welcome to the latest episode of Let's Know Buffalo. Our guest today is, I would say, your serial entrepreneur, Chris Naugle, because I feel like every couple of years you got yourselves into something different and unique and thinking outside of the box, growing outside of the box. So welcome. Thanks for being here.
Honor and a privilege. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So do you want to start? You're from Western New York, Lockport specifically. I know your story, and our audience probably doesn't, but a lot of your followers will. How did it start? How did you become an entrepreneur? I know it was from a very young age.
Yeah, so I didn't grow up in a family of entrepreneurs or a family of money, but my mom always taught me to dream. So when I was young, I'd come up with these crazy ideas, like digging a pond in the backyard, because why go to a pond when you can just dig one in the backyard? And my mom never said, no, that's a stupid idea. She said, shovels are outside, start digging. So, and I swear to God, I dug the pond. It's still there today. It took me an entire summer.
Seriously.
But as I went on, I got more ideas, and one of them was to be a pro snowboarder. I watched a video. My friend Jack was snowboarding, and I'm like, I want to be a pro snowboarder. That's what I want to do. And to snowboard, you got to have money. So I worked on farms, and then I got a job when I was 16 at a restaurant. And this is really where the story began, is that job, the owner of the restaurant treated me so poorly that I would say I was clinically depressed. Wasn't taking medication for it, but nothing in my life made any sense at that point in time because of the way I was treated. Wow. And there came that day that any person that's pushed enough, gets to where I just quit.
Sure.
And the day I quit, I didn't want to go home to Mom, who was like my unconditional one, and say, Mom, I just quit my first real job. So I had kind of masterminded this idea that I'd start a clothing line in the basement. It's going to be called Fat Clothing Company, PHAT, and I was going to print shirts with my art teacher, Mr. Mahalski. So when I came home, I had this whole business plan done because I kept thinking about it in school every single day. So I said, Mom, I quit my job, but I'm going to start this clothing line. It's Fat Clothing Company. I'm going to do this, and that's where the entrepreneurial started. And that was 16 years old.
I would say probably most parents would have looked at their kid and been disappointed or kind of said, what are you doing?
Oh, the rest of my family did.
I'm sure.
But my mom didn't. My mom was like, that's a great idea.
And that's incredible. And that's great to have that supporting network around you.
Yeah, that was fun. Those were some good days. But from there, I got the next idea, and that was to open a shop. I wanted my own store. I didn't want to just print T-shirts. I'm like, I'm going to have my own shop. And instead of it Fat Clothing Company, I was going to do Fat Man because, Fat was the clothing line. I was the man. Just put the two together. And that started with a business plan. And this is when I was in school at NCCC, and I had the Small Business Development Center at my access. So created a business plan, thought this is a shoe-in. $70,000 is what it was going to take, in the pro forma to open the shop in the Lockport Mall. I went around to everyone in my family that had money asking, hey, what do you think? Can you help me? Can you give me a loan? I visited every bank with this business plan.
I was just about to say, what did the bank say?
Every bank. I went to every single bank. And the only bank that even gave me a shot was M&T Bank. And I remember sitting there. I was totally out of place. And the guy said, I like this. You got all the right things for this. I think we could do this, but we would need collateral.
Sure.
I sincerely had no idea what they meant by collateral. So I asked him, I said, what do you mean? He says, well, something of value that would collateralize the loan. And I'm like, oh, okay, I've got a KX125. I've got this, I think at that time it was a LeBaron, and I got a wicked baseball and football card collection. What do you say? And he wasn't having it. So I went home. This was like my final thing. I had no one else to see that I could ask. And I told my mom, and she kind of understood it. And I don't know how it all came to be, but my mom sat me down because she saw my dream dying, and she said, what if I were to put the house up for collateral? My mom had one thing in the world, and that was the house she got in the divorce. Right. She still lives in that same 2-bedroom, 1-bath house out in Lockport. So she did. She put her house on the line so that her punk snowboard kid could chase his dream. And that's when I guess really the rubber met the road, and I became a real entrepreneur with real risks and consequences.
So if you didn't follow through, she was going to lose her house.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Really what it came down to.
And you didn't really have anyone guiding you. It sounds like you were learning as you went.
So my mentors back then were the teachers from high school. Remember I mentioned Mr. Mahalski. He was like, he was one of my biggest believers. And then I had Mr. Crawley was my accounting teacher, and then I had a business law teacher. So every one of these people pushed me a little bit further. And then when I was in Trip, his name's going to elude me, but he worked at the Small Business Development Center. He kind of took me under his wing and showed me, but I didn't have any true mentors. No one in my family knew the first thing about it. I mean, when I had the clothing line, I would learn in school in accounting class, like basic debits and credits. I would literally come home and I would apply what I learned in high school right there in real life in my business. And that's how I learned. And I did this every day.
Not to date you or I or Joe, the internet didn't exist.
No.
You couldn't go on YouTube and how do I start a business?
Right.
Where do I make, right? Like
Yeah.
there was no how-tos. Like you just did it.
That's it. We just did it. It's amazing that we were even able to survive. Can you guys believe that we actually made it without internet, without cell phones? Actually, we made it and it was awesome without all that crap.
I completely agree. I feel fortunate that I was able to experience life
Yeah.
without that stuff. Now, it's made life easier for the most part, right? But it's interesting, especially now that I have a kid, knowing that she's going to grow up.
She'll never know life without it. That's
And for how
to
many
have a
years
foot in
that's-
each
that's
like we
him.
did is great.
That's crazy.
I just think it's really fascinating. A lot of people we talked to, there was, someone that they were able to look at and be like, I want to be like that. And you really just did this on your own from just having an imagination and wanting to just not be treated poorly by somebody else and just making it happen on your own. That's inspiring to hear that. Like that was really just internally, it sounds like from you, that you made these decisions.
You know what's funny? You say that you didn't like being talked to that way or treated that way. I very much am a type A personality, right? I've worked for myself for a long time. I don't like to be told what to do, and I don't like to be yelled at. I tell people all the time, if I'm doing something, don't ever yell at me, right? Like, but that's just my thing too. Like I want that respect, but I also know that owning my own business for the last 20 some years that I've never had to answer to anybody now other than my wife.
I wasn't some arrogant kid that came in with an attitude that I didn't want to be there. I truly wanted to be there. And listen, I washed dishes there. I was a prep cook. I thought I was great. Like I loved it. But the way I was treated, and it was just nasty, yelling at me. There was times like I knew he was sending me out because they had all their food and everything out back. He'd send me back there and tell me to get something. I knew it didn't exist back there. But I would go back there, I would spend the time looking, and I knew I was going to come back and tell him it's not out there. He would go off on me, throw things, and then he'd say, I'm going to have to go back there and get it. And he wouldn't come back with it either. But this just went on over and over again. Every time I went to work, I was fearful to go to work, but I went because I needed the money.
Sure.
And yeah, that's what drove me to be an entrepreneur.
That's cool.
But you say I didn't, I did have people that I looked up to, not quote unquote one person that like was doing things I wanted, but like there was pro snowboarders that I just idolized.
Yeah.
And I watched their lifestyle. I see them in the magazines. I'd see them in the VHS tapes that I would watch. That's what I wanted. And listen, like to get what they had, I needed money. It was that simple. It wasn't like becoming an entrepreneur, especially the clothing line, was like, oh, I want to be this entrepreneur and make millions of dollars. No, man, I just wanted enough gas money to make it to Vermont over the weekend to compete at USSA. And I wanted to be able to come back. And there was many times where I'd go out there and I would compete or any of the competitions. I had enough money to pay to get out there. I had enough money to buy my entry into the event. Didn't have enough for a lift ticket, so I would hike up the hill. And if I didn't win, I was going to have a hard time getting back. So I would win, get the prizes, which were like back then they gave snowboards and jackets, and I would sell them in the parking lot.
Get out.
And that's how I fought. I did this over and over. It was just kind of a running joke. Like because I was a really good rider. And when I'd win the contest, people were like, are you going to sell your stuff? I'm like, yep, I'll be out in the parking lot after. Who wants it?
That's incredible.
Yeah, I did this over and over. And then eventually I went pro, and then I had the corporate credit card that they
Well, what's
funded.
wild is that especially entrepreneurs will, if you're going to figure out a way, if you want something,
That's right.
to get it, and no matter what it takes, you want something bad enough, you're going to figure out how to do it.
And it wasn't like I would set out on these contests being like, oh, Mom, I don't know if I'm going to have enough to come back. I knew I was coming back.
Sure.
I knew I was going to win because, like, that was the only alternative. That was the only way. Maybe not first, but if I got second or third, I knew the prizes.
Wow.
Every time, man. Every time.
So And you ended up having multiple locations, right?
I did. Yeah. So Fat Man Board Shop started in November of 1994. We're talking about dating ourselves. It was in Lockport Mall. It was epic. I'll never forget that opening. And then after that, lots happened. I had a partner. I ended up buying him out. And then I opened another location and another location. And that was going great. Like to say I was living in a fairy tale, that's it. I might have just as well been a unicorn that trailed around after me, because that's how perfect my life was back then. Everything I'd ever dreamed of, I had. I had my shops. I had the professional snowboarding career. Didn't have girlfriends back then, because who had time for that? But everything changed. I remember the day I landed from a trip to California. I'm driving down the 90 past the Galleria Mall. This is how vivid it is. I remember exactly where I was when I heard about it. On the radio, I heard about a plane hitting a tower. And then the other one, we know that was 9/11. Sure. I went to my store, which is in Orchard Park, a brand new boutique that we had just opened up. We were highly leveraged because we were just expanding fast. And then what followed next was the dot-com recession. Right. And that recession literally crushed my businesses. And this was the first time during that entire time, from 17 straight up till, what would that be? I would have been 22 or so, that I had to get a job, because I physically couldn't make it running the business and doing it. So I put my resume out, and the funny thing is nobody got a hold of me until I got a couple calls, and it was like simultaneous, from Wall Street firms. And I couldn't understand what Wall Street wanted to do with a punk snowboard kid that wore a beanie and a toque every single day. But I needed a job. So I remember Grandma took me to Lurch and Daly's. You remember Lurch and Daly's in Lockport?
I do.
It was a suit shop. It's been long gone. But she took me there. She got me a gray suit, a zip-up black tie, and a white shirt for my first interview. I didn't know how to tie a tie. So I went to the interview, and
I do. I just don't
had no experience in Wall Street or money, but I had that entrepreneurial spirit, and they saw that, and they hired me. I only stayed at that firm to get my licenses, because I kind of realized it was like a chop shop. And then I went to a large firm, a New York City firm, right after that, and I spent 16 years, in Wall Street. Not all of it at that firm, but that was my beginning journey into the money space.
Were all the stores closed at that time, or did you still have the stores open?
No. I still had the stores. We closed that Orchard Park store, absorbed it into a store in the Galleria Mall. The Galleria Mall, we were in a temporary space right before Christmas. And you know this because you played this game. Right before Christmas, we got the letter that we had to move, because the Apple store was taking over the little corner where we were. So in a temporary lease, you had no choice. And we put a lot of money into that. So now right before Christmas, I got to find a new place in the Galleria Mall, and every space they showed was crap. So we literally backed U-Hauls up. During business hours, we had police telling us we couldn't do it. I'm like, stop me, because I was so mad. And we loaded everything. We took it over to our Sheridan Drive location, and now we had 2 shops.
Wow. So it's interesting, too, like the stores, because they're still there, people would think like, oh, you're doing fine. But the struggle you were going through, that you had to, go get a job and, downsize, move stores, like people probably would have no idea like what you were really going through.
Yeah, with the stores, I don't know if a lot of people know this. I never made a lot of money. Sure. I made a lot of good decisions with the stores, but they never made me a ton of money. I think our highest grossing year with 2 shops is like $600,000. Now that sounds like a lot when people hear that, but that's a retail store.
Right.
That means you make maybe $50,000, $60,000 is about what I would make.
Yeah.
And I didn't even take all of that, because I poured a bunch of it back in. Yeah, the business never made me a ton, but it taught me a lot. Yeah. And I made a lot of money in Wall Street. I made hundreds of thousands every year when I got into my stride. And when I was in Wall Street, it was kind of another one where I had no choice. I had to make it. So I'll give you a quick thing about the Wall Street world. I remember when I first started, I got my licenses. We're in the bullpen, which is the middle, and all the big advisors around the outside. You're just pond scum to them. They don't even talk to you at that point. But I remember watching those success, and there was a couple guys that I knew were the kingpins in that office. And I watched what they did. They'd show up right before the bell rang in the morning. During lunch, they were always gone. They'd leave for an hour, hour and a half, and then they were punched out by 4:30, 5 o'clock. So I said, all right, if I'm going to have one of those offices, I got to do everything they're unwilling to do. I got to the office. I was usually the very first person there. Maybe a couple admin ladies were there, but I was the first one. 7 a.m. I'd try to get there. I would work through lunch and pound the phone during lunch. And then when they left, that's when I hit the phones. And then I went out and I saw people at their kitchen tables. And I very very quickly became number 3 in that office. Yeah, I never ended up being number 1 in that firm because the main guy who was ended up being my business partner, I could never catch him.
So where I come in and where we met is you had just recently, you had opened up Fat Man on Sheridan Drive, but you had purchased the building and remodeled it. And I was looking to expand my video game stores, and I was looking at the building next door, your old spot where he had just moved from. I saw the sign in the window. I didn't like this guy. He didn't want to put any money into it, do any build out. I said, screw you. I called the number on the sign where he was, and that was my introduction to you and how we met. Following that, I opened up my location there. I was able to watch you with your retail stores, and I was a couple years younger than you. You had been in the industry in retail. So when we talk about like mentors and being in learning, like I learned, I literally had a store 2 doors down in the same plaza where I was able to watch how you expanded, how you ran a retail. I had never run a retail. I didn't even work in a retail store before I opened up a retail store. Never did. Like straight out of college. So I will say that, again, following your path and watching how you built and grew your business was huge. Like I literally had the blueprint 2 doors down from me. And I was over there when it was quiet every day.
I remember that.
Wandering around the store, talking to him, talking to his employees, just like feeding off
a
of
sponge.
the knowledge. Yeah, because, dude, there was days, no lie, when I opened up this location, I would take a nap in the office. I literally brought my recliner from home. I had a microwave, a TV in the office, and I would wait for the door chime to go off. And at the time, I'm 25, 26 years old. I'm going out at night with my buddies who are still in college drinking. And then I would work the retail store 6 days a week because I don't think we were open on Sunday at the time. Maybe when we moved to that location. But I was there all the time. Like I literally lived out of the office. And, I would fall asleep in the chair, wait for that door chime to go off, go out, cash out a cost. Now, the stores are different, but in its prime, it was like there was no downtime. There was multiple, 2 employees plus a manager on the floor. But I give you a lot of credit for what you did and knowing how brutal retail is, coming from that industry and getting out of it. I was able to watch and learn and just kind of be a fly on the wall, like from promotions to sales to setting up a store. Just everything to do with retail.
Yeah, it was really exciting to watch your progression too in that, because I know in the beginning I was worried because I'm like, I knew he was like not super busy because I could see the parking lot and I'm like, man, is he going to be able to pay rent? So every time I come over and we'd be talking, but then I watched the business get busier and busier and busier. And then I'm like, how is he doing what he's doing? What you don't know though is right before you met me, I was almost bankrupt. That's what you don't know.
Sure.
Because I bought that building in 2008 before the Great Recession let loose. Right before the Great Recession let loose. And I borrowed money from some really bad people, but they were crazy enough to give me the money, hard money lenders. And I'll never forget when the Great Recession hit, everything stopped. My retail stores plummeted. It was right before Christmas that happened. My Wall Street job was just not happening at that time. So I was literally one payment away from being bankrupt. And you remember I just started dating my wife.
Sure.
She was my girlfriend then,
Yeah.
Larissa. And I came home one night super late because I would stay at the shop really late. And I came home and I said, sweetie, I don't know what to do, but I need your help. And she said, yeah, what do you need? And I said, I need your help paying the mortgage. I need your help paying the utilities. By the way, my friend Pete's going to move into that bedroom down the hall because I had the house in Lockport on Cherry Street. And my friend Jessica's going to move in upstairs, as if I should have finished with any questions. Well, long story short, when I tell that story from stage, 'cause I speak all over the country now, I go down in the crowd and I talk to the women and I'm like, what do you think my chances were of keeping her? And they're like, none. I'm like, you give a guy no credit. Like, I thought I had a 50-50 shot of her sticking around, but yeah, she did. And we've been married for a long time.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, I was literally flat broke.
So was that your introduction to real estate?
I was just going to ask that.
Well, real estate started in 2006, actually. So I had, on TV, I had seen a show. What was his name? I can't remember his name, but he flipped the house in 45 minutes, 40 minutes or whatever his show runtime was.
Which is very realistic.
Yeah, very unrealistic. But I remember I got this idea, and I got a hold of, this is when I met Anas, and I had her show me a house out in Gasport. It was this just dilapidated farmhouse. And me and my friend Mike pulled together money. I think we paid 40 grand for the house, and we bought the house, and the goal was after work, each of us would go there, we'd do the work, and we'd flip this house. A little over a year later, we finally finished the house, way over budget. I was, again, struggling financially.
I feel like that's your favorite word.
What's that?
Over budget?
Over budget. My God. And Larissa wasn't even help me design it. I still went over budget. But I mean, back then, you just write things on a piece of paper, roof, 10 grand, this, that, and you thought, oh, that's it. You forget about all the little things that go wrong. And boy, did things go wrong. But I ended up putting it up for sale. We couldn't sell it. I rented it to, Bob Timke?
Yeah.
He's a good friend of mine. But I rented it to Bob. And then Bob ended up buying that house.
Okay.
So that's how I ended up getting out of that. 07, I did another flip. And then 08, I bought the strip mall.
Nice.
So, but then the real estate story started in 09.
So how did that come? That's how I know of you.
I was almost bankrupt. So I knew a couple of things. I was reading a lot of Warren Buffett books, and he always talked about the fundamentals of making money and investing. Buy low, sell high, and don't lose money. So I knew real estate was ridiculously cheap. I was starting to rebound. My financial business was coming back, and I actually was in. It started in 09, but in 2010, I sold Fat Man board shops, and that gave me some money to fuel the apartment buildings. But I just literally started buying apartment buildings, pennies on the dollar. I had taken some courses online, and I learned how to do a pro forma so that I knew what was a good buy. And so hilarious. But back then, I looked at $20,000 a door as being ridiculously priced. We were buying like $10,000 to $15,000 a door. I'm just try to rationalize that. That's how cheap things were back then, and that's what I was doing. And I was buying buildings over there in Black Rock, all the areas now that probably those houses are like 500-600, or those apartment buildings are probably 500-600,000. I was buying them for 80 grand, 70 grand, and then I would put money into them. I would do all the work myself. I would mow the lawns myself, and I just did one after another. I got up to 36 units from 09 to 14, so I was doing really well. And actually, you'll know this property, 103 Genesee in Lockport. It was an 8-unit.
Mm-hmm.
It was a problem child, to say the least. But I remember...
I feel like I just saw that come up for sale again sometime.
Jeremy list that? Because Jeremy ended up buying it from me.
Yeah.
He got a
definitely
steal on it. Yeah, but the house was no different than when I owned it. Yeah.
For a restaurant.
But what happened is at 14, I was expanding really fast, which means you leverage, you take on debt. I was doing well financially, not great, but doing well. I took my 37th door to the same bank, and Greg, who was my bank broker, said, no, we can't give you another loan. And I said, why? He said, your debt-to-income ratio is out of whack, because they always asked for new financials. And I said, okay. But then after that, the bank, and we all know the bank, First Niagara is what they used to be. They were being acquired. I did not know that, and I wasn't told that. So what they did is they looked at all the risky drivers, which I came up, and they froze my line of credit. That line of credit was the only thing I had that allowed me to renovate these units, because I had a lot of units that weren't done yet. So they froze the line, which got me really behind. And you knew me at this time. I was struggling because of the 2008 recession, still lagging effects. And I ended up having to sell every property. And a lot of it was, number one, because I was just struggling financially a little bit, but really I was just so fed up with real estate at that point. So yeah, I sold every one of those units, and I did okay, and that's what transitioned us into flipping houses.
Wow.
You've got again, your story just continues to be fascinating as you go along, because at one time...
Did I keep failing? Is that why?
But I'll tell you that there's nobody I've ever met in my life that takes the risk like you do. Yeah. You're willing to put yourself out there. You're willing to go bigger than probably anybody that I know. Like I feel like I'm risky, but my risks are safe. I don't even know if they're a risk. Like, and I'm not saying that you're so risky, but you swing. You swing for home runs every single time. And I guess that's the best analogy I can use, is that you're not looking. I'm over here just hitting singles all day long. I'm gonna round the bases with singles. You're fucking swinging for the fences every single time. And that's got you where you are today.
It has. And I think a lot of that was ingrained, with the snowboarding, because you were always, it was just you versus the course, you and yourself. You were your only competitor really with snowboarding. So I think a lot of my risk taking came from those early days as a
Well,
pro
but I
snowboarder.
also think as a professional athlete, you have a different mindset of
Yeah.
just Joe Smith coming off the street,
Yeah,
right?
probably.
Or like in any entrepreneur, because what you have to do to train and be dedicated and sacrifice to get to those levels, whether it's snowboarding, tennis, baseball, basketball, whatever it is, that's less than 1%. It's like the 0.01% of the population gets to do anything like that.
I don't think a lot of people realize what it takes to be an entrepreneur.
sure.
Right? I don't think a lot of people realize that, like, to make all that stuff happen, like the shops, we'll just talk about that. I would get to the stores at 9 and I would work till 10 o'clock. But this wasn't just 1 or 2 days a week. This was every day.
6, 7 days a
Sundays were 12 to 5. That was my break. And then, when I started getting staff, like I would take off and I would go surf, like, because I used to surf the lakes a lot. So if it was a windy day where the surf was up, I would call Randy, who was my manager. He would come in and I would go surf. Weekends were always snowboarding because I would compete. So I would always take off Saturdays and Sundays in the winter. But that was it. Every other day, it was all day, every day. And I loved every minute of it. And even today, like, things are very different financially today, but I still am always the first one in the office and almost always the last one out. Now I got a little girl now, so that changes dynamics. But yeah, I mean, I don't even know the last weekend I didn't work. I mean, I'm on the road every weekend speaking at another event.
Well, I think as entrepreneurs, it's always, you're always on.
It's just it, but it's not like
it's
you're
a lifestyle,
yeah, exactly.
and it's 7 days a week. And listen, there's plenty of days where my buddy says, "Hey, let's go on the boat or let's go golfing." Boom, I'm there. I'm not the one making the phone call. Like, I'll if I can make it happen, I'll make it happen. But that phone's ringing at night. It's on the weekends. Whether it's retail or my rentals or my flips or my real estate sales clients, right? Like, you're always on.
Never.
But I'll tell people too, it's not like you can't really turn the phone off. You're just postponing when you're going to get to that stuff. There's just going to be more for you to do later. So it's always a challenge.
And there's plenty of days where I'm just like, I'm envious of the person that clocks out at 5
Oh yeah.
or 4:30, and they're like, "See you tomorrow at 8 a.m." and they just shut it off, and they got no worries for the rest of the night. But for the most part, I would say that's the small percentage, right? Like the things that I've been able to do, or the flexibility in my life now, having a daughter like yourself, and being an
Always
entrepreneur.
my reminder to go pick her up, but I'm not picking her up from school.
But that affords me my time back now, right? And I think you probably talked about it, paying for your time or getting your time back. What is that? What cost does that come?
That's everything.
Yeah.
Like when I talk to people from stage or anywhere, I'm like, the only reason we're all on this hamster wheel or whatever you want to call it, the wealth, journey, is to buy time back.
Sure.
That is the only purpose, because time is the one thing that we can't get back, and it is the most precious resource.
I just recently went on a buddy's golf trip down to Peak and Peak. We used to do Orlando and some other places, and we'd go for a week. This time, since COVID, it messed a lot of things up. And a lot of my buddies are a little bit older. They're entrepreneurs. They're business guys, executives. And they're in their 50s now talking about retirement. And I'm just like, you're talking about retirement? Like, that's insane to me. And now, 42 going on 43, like it's wild to think that I've got friends that are talking about retirement. But then I start to think about myself, and you talk about buying your time back. And I just keep thinking, like, I'm adding rentals to my portfolio. And every time I add a rental, I get a raise. And every time I get a raise, I'm that much closer to saying, when do I shut it off? And I'm in my I have no plans anytime. But if tomorrow or next week or next year, 5 years, whatever it is, I just wanted to say, hey, I'm just going to live off my rental income. Like, that's where the level I've gotten to now. It's like, how much do I need to live monthly, yearly, based on my investments?
I love that, because I want more people like you that want to keep adding those rentals, because the one thing I know is they all need more money. And I've gone that whole circle with the flips and the houses, and I hate flipping houses. Hate it with a passion. And I kind of punched out of it, after the show, the HGTV show didn't work in 18. I really changed gears. I sold off all the rentals, during the COVID thing.
I got a couple of them. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank God for taking them. And I had a bunch of money, and then I wanted to be the bank. And I was told a long time ago, the ultimate in real estate is being the bank. So I just had to figure this out. So I started lending money. And so now, like, when people like you want to keep expanding, I know there's lots more people like you that need money. I just keep lending it. So you buy a property, you get a raise. I just lend you money, and I do absolutely nothing. And you give me a raise.
We'll talk about that business in a second, but I think it's extremely interesting. The combination of all of your businesses and your careers, from retail to being a financial manager, right? Professional snowboarder to flipping houses. What you're doing today is like everything packed into one.
And 2 things. That's it. I do 2 things today. That's it. And they're both really one and the same.
But the experience from all of those.
All of that, I could never do what I did today without
that was
each one of those steps in my life. Without each one of those failures, I could not be successful with what I do today. No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
So talk a little bit more about what you do today.
Sure. So let me just start with BYOB, be your own banker. So that's the biggest thing I do. That's my biggest business to date. I mean, we're the largest in the country. But how that company started is when I had the TV show, I had to, when the show got greenlit and we were doing it, I had to retire from Wall Street. They wouldn't approve the OBA, the outside business activity. So I sold my financial practice and I burned the boats. All I had was the TV show, but the TV show didn't go. So now all of a sudden I'm like, what am I going to do? I had money school. I had, some things going on, but I was always bringing Brent in, and Brent Kessler, who's now my mentor and my business partner. But I was always bringing him into my RIAs because we would do a monthly RIA like we still do today, and he would speak on Be Your Own Bank and the money multiplier method. And I would sit in the back, being a financial guy. I knew exactly what he was talking about, and I was using it because I started using it in 2014. So I knew all about how to be the bank, but I never wanted to teach it to people or do anything. It was like, this is my little secret. I'm keeping this. So he'd come out, I'd watch 80, 100 people at this RIA, and I'd watch them react to him teaching them what I already knew, and it was magical to see. I'm like, I've been missing this the whole time. And I'll never forget, there was one time Brent came out to speak, and he was exhausted. You could tell he was on the road a lot. And my wife, we were in the back of the room, and she says, Chris, you got to help him. You're the only one that knows us well enough to literally go out and speak and help him. You guys could divide and conquer. And I'm like, yeah. We'll talk about it later, as I often do to my wife. Yeah. We'll talk about that. And we go to dinner, and back then it was frog hair. And my wife had asked me, she said, so you're going to talk to him at dinner? I'm like, yeah. Dinner's going on. It's almost over. I hadn't brought it up. My wife's mood had completely changed. And anyone listening, and you too, if you're married, you'll know of that change.
You're
and
not listening.
all of a sudden, dinner's almost over. I got kicked in the ankle really hard, like a side kick to the ankle. Brent noticed this and said, oh, is everything okay? And she just had that stare at me, and she says, no, Chris has something to tell you. And I'm like, yeah, Brent, I was thinking, if you want, I'd be willing to go out and speak at some events, help you out, help build this business, only if you need the help, because I really didn't want to do it at this point. And actually what he said was not what I was expecting. He's like, you would do that for me? I'm like, well, my wife's kind of making me. I didn't say it. I'm like, yeah,
but
of course.
You're thinking that you're asking for some.
Yeah.
And in fact, he was like,
oh my God, you would do that for me? Wow. And I'm like, of course I would. I mean, I know this pretty well. I'd have to practice, but I think I could. And that's where it all began. I flew to Florida, discussed the whole business arrangement, and that was then. And well, now this is this. And now we've grown the company to be the biggest in the country. Brent is kind of stepping back now, and me and his daughter are taking over that company. I also built another company that is basically under it. So in that field, there's the general agency, and I'm the sub agency, so that all fits. So the two companies combined just make us a powerhouse, and we just keep pushing that further and further. And it's simple. It's kind of, sometimes I'm like, how is it that this is so successful, and why is it that more people aren't doing this? Because really there's nothing to it. It's like, change one thing where your money goes first, and then add one step and act and do what a bank does. Sure. We're all used to banks. We know how banks work. So all we did is we said, we're not going to use the banks anymore. We're going to become the bank, and we're going to mimic everything a bank does. It's all we teach. And we set the mechanism up with giant mutually owned insurance companies, which is the funding aspect of it. Instead of putting the money in their bank where they control our money and lend it out and make a spread, we put the money in a specially designed and engineered whole life policy. Nothing like the ones you've bought. These are highly specialized.
Sure.
And then we run our savings through them. And then we just deploy the money, private lending, real estate, cars. I love cars. And then everything that makes, we don't put it back in their bank. We take it and put it back in our bank. It's like, I always tell people it's like Monopoly, because everybody knows Monopoly. Monopoly, you go around the board, and when you pass go, you get $200. So in my game, BYOB, the same thing. You go around a board, which is a year, 12 months, and when you pass that 12th month, you get a dividend from the insurance company. But the whole time around the board, you got paid compounding interest in the form of interest, guaranteed interest. But I don't know anybody that's ever played Monopoly that just rushes around the board and tries to pass go, because that's how they're going to win the game. They go around the board and they stop on all these things. Should I buy this? Should I put a house here? Should I put an apartment here? And they keep doing that. That's what I do. I do a real game of Monopoly using giant mutually owned insurance companies, and I just keep building on it. And the best part is no matter what I deploy money into, cars, like the vehicle I drove up in, that vehicle, people are like, wow, that's such a nice car. How much was it? It doesn't matter, because I get all the money back for every car I ever buy, drive, and own. If I buy a rental, I get every dollar back for that rental without having to worry about, making it make money over time. It's just because I control the money and because I'm being paid on my money twice. 24/7, 7 days a week, my money's working for me. And I don't have to work any harder, longer, or take on any risk for that to happen. It's just mathematics.
And for anybody listening, I know that's a quick tutorial and
no way
probably
they'll understand
blowing
it.
your mind, but look up Chris Naugle and look up BRB, be your own bank,
BYOB.
BYOB, be your own bank. And it's fascinating because once you start learning and reading, it literally blows your mind.
And the only reason people don't do it, people are always like, when they learn it and they start using it, they're like, why doesn't everybody do this? Well, because everybody has a preconceived notion in their head that this is too good to be true. Or Dave Ramsey says, buy term, invest the difference, because that whole life stuff is garbage. But Dave doesn't even understand what we do with whole life. And we've proved it mathematically. That's where we've gotten to a point now where there's not a single person, I don't care, the highest academic comes to us and says, your system doesn't work. We can mathematically prove everything we do to an utmost science. And we've just mathematically proved that buy term, invest the difference is not the ultimate and does not work.
Well, I can speak for not knowing exactly what you're talking about, but as a real estate agent, I've seen people who have taken your classes, learned from you, build these giant portfolios that literally have I've had clients where, they come to me and we're talking about maybe they're buying a rental here, a rental there. The next thing you know, they're like, yeah, I think I'm going to buy this, 40-unit apartment building. And my reaction would be like, wait, where's the money coming from? And so I've seen firsthand, the results of what you're talking about, which is
great.
Which is really the cool thing that.
And I know we're not going to go down the rabbit hole and explain it here, but it's not hard. Like you said, go to chrisnaugle.com and you can watch the 90-minute video, which will explain it perfectly. Or my YouTube channel, I think now has over 1,000 videos, all free, that you can learn it. So it's not like it's hard to learn it. It's just you got to want change. Some people just go through their entire lives giving up control of their money, just saying, this is just what the hand I've been dealt. That is not the way it is. You got to change your mindset before you'll ever change your finances.
We talked about that earlier today with another entrepreneur. Is his business was similar, and he started as an entrepreneur thinking outside the box, going against the grain, and not listening to everything you've always been taught just because somebody told you that was the right way to do it.
Bingo. Bingo. And that's the secret. That's the secret sauce to anything in life. Like, if you just take and follow everybody else's lead, what everybody else is doing, guess what? You're going to be like everybody else. You're going to conform to what everybody else is doing, which most of those people realize they're chasing a failed dream, a failed financial plan. Earl Nightingale, in his Strangest Secret in the World, identifies the difference between success and failure in the most perfect way ever. Success and failure, the only difference between someone that's successful and somebody that has failed or will fail is creation. People that are successful create, and people that fail conform. That is it. You want to make it simple? So start creating. Create your life, your dreams. Don't let anybody else tell you you can't accomplish everything you've ever dreamed of. I'm living proof. You guys are living proof. Listen, there's no one could tell me you can't do that. I wouldn't believe them.
Sure.
Inherently, like, I would say, no, watch me. That's exactly hold my beer,
Well, because you've done it and you've proven
Even
over
if I
and
hadn't done
over.
it, I will do it because I believe and I know I can.
Sure. And there's,
Won't be
I
easy.
think that confidence comes with age and maturity and experience and life experiences, failures, right? I think, again, going back to being an entrepreneur, one of the things that we just talked about was I tend to question everything. Why did that person act like that? Why did they do that? Why is that run like that? For what? And try to look behind. Because I always feel like, especially in sales, unfortunately, like, all right, I'm going to buy a new car. That salesperson, why did he say that? Like, what's the line of bullshit, right? What is he selling me? Like, can I see past that and go around them, right? So I think being an entrepreneur and trying to go against the grain, thinking outside the box, and understanding patterns and people and behaviors. And again, it's almost probably to a detriment these days that I literally question everything.
There's nothing wrong with that. I think everything needs to be questioned in today's world.
Yeah. And I mean, now probably now more than ever,
More than
right?
ever.
You know,
Genuine curiosity, I think, is what makes people not stay stagnant. Like if you're just genuinely curious about different things, and you teach yourself things,
Sure.
you learn new things.
but it's wild how so many people, and again, I'm not going down the rabbit hole. I'm not political, but the sheep, right? They're just
plenty
following
of sheep.
the pattern,
And those
right?
they're
and
not-
they're just
they're not
doing it.
genuinely curious.
And that's one thing about Buffalo I will say is I see a lot of my family just doing what my aunts and my uncles and my grandparents that's just what we were taught. It's, from just the 9-to-5 job, going to work for the man, putting away for your retirement, making your mortgage payment, the same recipe for Sunday spaghetti sauce, right? It just gets passed down. And I have to be honest, I feel like I'm the first in my family I initially didn't go to college, but I did go to college. I was first in family to go to college. And then I was first in my family to not use that degree and become an entrepreneur and not work the 9-to-5 job, right? And again, was just always sort of instilled
Ed
in me.
Milet would call you the one.
Yeah.
The one in the family that didn't follow the path.
And I started to.
The black sheep.
When I graduated high school, it was like, boom, I went and did a construction job, 9-to-5. My dad said, go get a job. You're not going to college? Go get a job. And then I got a job. I'm like, this job sucks, right? Like, I did not like what I was doing. So what are you going to do next? Going to college, right? And then, the rest is history.
And I've almost taken the bait a lot of times. I'm sure you did too, where, someone in your family's like, why can't you just be content? Why can't you just be happy? Why can't you just be normal is basically what they're trying to say.
Yeah.
And, sometimes in my life when I was in those deep, dark places, when I was failing and almost bankrupt, I'm like, yeah, what is all this? Why don't I just be normal? Why don't I just get a job and just take off the weekends and just live a normal life and just,
Right.
like, why? And then all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, whoa, what the hell was I just thinking about? Dude,
Yeah,
what?
that's the small percentage, and I think I talked about
Can't
that
do it.
earlier. Once you get a taste of being an entrepreneur and working for yourself and having success, it's like, man, that's addicting, right? And when my wife and I had already owned I think all the 6 video game stores. My wife and I met. I was 29 or 30 years old, had some success, and on our first date, I had my cell phone and I put it on the table, and we're talking, and I said, hey, just so you know. We did, the introductions and talking life, and I own my own business. My phone is on me. I promise it's going to ring during dinner, and it's going to ring on the weekends, and it's going to ring at night. Like, if you can't handle me that attached to my hip, then it's great. It's nice knowing you. Like, we'll have dinner. We'll go on our merry way. And, listen, there's plenty of days where she's just like, but 99% of the time, she gets it. She understands. That's the lifestyle that we chose,
100%.
right? And then there's the give and take with it,
Yeah, I think the biggest thing entrepreneurs, at least successful ones, what they get addicted to is solving somebody else's problem.
Yeah.
Seeing the result in somebody else of what it is you taught them, what it is you do for them. Like when somebody walks into their brand new house that you helped them get. I mean, just that feeling, that's what I've gotten addicted to. So much so that now, like with my foundation, like the biggest thing I'm working toward now is just to keep being able to put more money in the foundation to do more good and give more. And people don't understand that. And I never did either. I'm like, well, I'm going to take care of myself first before I give. But if I just started back a long time ago with giving more than trying to take more, I would be way further ahead than I am now.
No,
That's what I've become addicted to. And that's what I've realized as I've gotten wisdom with age, because that's just a time thing. I've realized that the one thing I was missing in all that failure, those steps I had to get, was I wasn't focused on solving somebody else's problem. I was always focused on solving my problem.
Right.
And I wasn't focused on giving. I was always like, well, when I get, I'll give. It's backwards. The universe knows that.
No, and again, you can look back today and say, hey, I was short-sighted, but you were able to recognize that and do something about it, and you've reaped the benefits of it, right?
Absolutely.
What a story. That's
it's
amazing.
just beginning.
So
That's the best part.
yeah, what is next for you? I mean, so you're traveling all over the country speaking. I've seen ads on my social media of you doing events and things like that. So what does the future look like for you?
Well, it's not that. Let me be clear about that. It's not traveling around and speaking as much as I do now. As a matter of fact, I keep trying to slow the speaking down, but then I get invited to speak with like my heroes, like people that I never could have dreamed of keynoting an event with. I was just in Arizona keynoting an event with Kim Kiyosaki, who else? Mark Victor Hansen, Ed Milet, who's the #1 guy, and I'm literally in the green room talking with him, and I'm going to be going to Ed's house like in December. So it's just like, those are awesome things that have like just been lifelong goals that I've gotten to. But my #1 thing is, so I've got the two companies, BYOB and Money Multiplier, and then I've got Private Money Club, which is literally, it was just a pet project. It was when I was lending, I could not find good borrowers. So on a piece of paper, I drew a circle and I said, there's only two types of people in the world. There's people with money and there's people that need money. That's a mass market product, I said. And each has a problem. People with money want to make more. So that's their problem. People that need money, well, their problem is they need money to make more money. I said, so why isn't there one community, one place where those two people can come to solve their problem? Why isn't there a dating site for money? Because that's how my mind thought about it. It's so simple. I'm like, this is just like the dating sites I used back in the day. Like, this doesn't exist for money. So I created it. Private Money Club is a dating site for money. And I set it up from day one with an exit, because we talk about buying back time. So what is my big play? Probably within 5 years from today, mark my word, within 5 years, I will exit Private Money Club for north of $350 million. The deposit ticket's already in my back pocket, and it has been from the first day. And I tell people that, they're like, you're crazy. Yeah, wouldn't you be happy with 50 million? I'm like, that's my number, 350, and it'll be worth a lot more, but I'm not taking it to $1 billion. I'm taking it to 350 million. And when I exit for that, now I can buy all the time I want. Not that I will. Not like some people would be like, I would just retire. I would just do this. I won't, because that's not how I'm wired. I'll go out and I'll do more with foundations. I'll do more with giving. I'll create shelters for animals. I'll create, clean water for places. I will be able to do all the things I've ever wanted to do, but I'll probably work more than I do now.
Sure.
But it will be working on things that really drive my inner
different
soul.
capacity.
Right,
Yeah.
Totally different capacity. Yeah. I will continue to do BYOB because that'll be a legacy company. If my daughter, who always says, be your own bank, Daddy, be your own bank, she'll probably take that over, just like Brent's daughter, Hannah, took that over. I'm hoping, but I will never tell her she has to. If she doesn't want to, well, I'll exit that company too, and I'll find something new. But there will always be the next thing, because I will never arrive, because I believe when somebody arrives, the only place to go is back down. And, well, I love snowboarding down hills, but I don't want to ride the financial game back down the hill. So I'll always just keep creating.
Wow. I give you credit, my friend. I think you're an incredible inspiration to people to go out and take risks, follow your dreams, and never to take no for an answer. So
thanks, man.
Appreciate you being here. Do one last plug for your businesses.
Yeah. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me everywhere on social media at The Chris Naugle. Just put the in front of Chris Naugle. My website, chrisnaugle.com, beyourownbank.com. I'm all over the place. Just Google me and you'll find all that. The other thing, too, I will say, just in parting words, is there's a quote that has changed everything for me, and it was from Will Rogers. And he says, the biggest problem in America is not what people don't know. He said the biggest problem in America is what people think that they know that just ain't so.
Sure.
And to the audience, I would say, be very careful who you take advice from. Make sure nobody ever stops you from chasing your dream, and make sure you chase your own path, not somebody else's.
Couldn't have said it better myself, my friend. Thank you again for being here, and that's our latest episode of Let's Know Buffalo. Please like, share, heart, tell all your friends. We love doing this. We love bringing local entrepreneurs and local stories of success and failure and success again. So again, Chris, thank you.
Thanks guys.
Chris.
Appreciate it.
That was amazing.